Tutum, tutum, tutum. That could be Leaders Heartbeat. But today, I'm super interested to hear from Eva McLellan, General Manager of Roche Slovenia, what she brings and what heartbeat of hers means when she is in the country of love. Eva, hello. Let me start with a question which might be super complex or super easy. Who is Eva?
Well, Eva is a daughter, a sister, a wife, a committed friend, general manager of Roche Slovenia, scientist by background, and lover of all good things and people, and yeah, living in the country, as you say, with love in its name, and it's so lovely to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being part of the community, and maybe the question which we often pose to people who come from abroad is, what do you think about our country, and how do you bring new things to us?
Yeah, you know, Slovenia is one of those. I was actually at the airport going through the security, and someone said, "Oh, you live in Slovenia?" I said, "Yeah. What do you know about Slovenia?" And they said it's a relatively small country, but it's an extraordinary country. And I love asking people what they think, because that's exactly what I think of Slovenia. I think Slovenia punches above its weight in many categories. You know, you have the #1 PhDs per capita, so you have a very educated workforce. I think in STEM, the number of graduates from STEM programs is 7th in Europe per capita. So you have a highly skilled scientific and biotechnology workforce, and therefore it's not a myth that then biotechnology companies like Roche, like Novartis, like many other companies, you know, find Slovenia a really great place. The other thing that I really appreciate about Slovenia, other than the good food and the good wine, is the environmental sustainability piece. I think it's like 40% covered by forests. Very committed to the Green Deal and preserving that. And if you look at Slovenia's ranking in terms of all the things they're doing to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, I think you rank really high. I think it's in the top 10 out of 180 countries. So these are the things I look for. As you can see, I get very detailed about the country, but I just find not a lot of people know that about Slovenia, and therefore I think it's we need to continue to lead in this way and be an example, but also preserve the good things we're doing so that we don't fall behind.
Do you think that not many people from abroad or even in the country know that? And maybe the view from abroad in terms when you sit in Switzerland and you think, okay, my next assignment will be Slovenia. How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, you know, I didn't really think about it that way. Slovenia came up. I honestly didn't know as much as I know about it now. And so for every assignment that I go to, I get curious about the country. And I've lived in Belgium and Brussels. I've lived in Basel in Switzerland. You know, I'm Canadian by background. So every country I go to, I go with a very open heart and an open mind. And what I look for is what's unique. You know, the first question I ask is, what is unique about this place? What do you differentiate? And I go to a little exploration. And as you see, I learn a lot. So I think, you know, I think a lot of people don't know a lot about their own country. That's what surprises me. When I was in Brussels in Belgium, I was asking my colleagues, you know, do you know who invented the saxophone? And they said, oh, no. So half the people didn't know that Adolf Sax invented the saxophone, and he's from 𝑑𝑒, Belgium, you know. So I think it's just a natural thing when you're a fish in water. You don't know you're in water. And so it's sometimes, if you're a curious foreigner, it's good to come and kind of do some of this research, see the country with fresh eyes, and then, you know, share what you see. Some of the stuff people agree with, some of them don't, but the facts don't lie in terms of the rankings. And just recently we had your cyclists win in Zurich. So there
Were you cheering for Pogačar?
I was absolutely cheering for him. He was in Zurich, you know, he was kind of in the country I spent a lot of time in, and I was so proud to see him do such a good job.
Maybe if we use an analogy between the cyclist being just one can be the world champion and the whole team needs to work with him, for him. Can you draw the analogy with leadership? How does is it similar? Is Eva the #1 cyclist and the other will help? How do you see that?
Well, cycling is an individual sport, just like race car driving is an individual sport. But I think what people don't realize is, yes, maybe the cyclist is actually performing on the day, but it's a collective, leadership is a collective sport. Cycling, or I think Formula One is also a really good example. It takes hundreds of people to prepare the bike, the tires, the athlete, the coaches, and everybody has a really specific role. And on the day, you know, that person then obviously has to perform, but I think, you know, like any good sportsman or sportswoman, it's a team sport, and leadership comes from the word leiden, which is to guide and to walk with. And I think it's an active verb. So in business, I think it's not so much similar to sports because it's really a guiding role. It's a role to guide others and really understand, you know, what the potential is in the system and help the potential get there.
How do you see the willingness of people to take responsibility? Because in one way you are guiding them, on the other way you are empowering them, you mentor them, but at one point they need to take their own responsibility. Do you think people are good in that, and is there a different way how they are doing in different parts of the world?
Yeah, there definitely is cultural components in different parts of the world, but I think human beings by nature are very similar. So I think we are more similar across cultures than we are different. Yeah, I think human beings naturally want to be responsible. I think, you know, their natural sense is to be a responsible human being. Anybody who has, and I work with very talented people. You know, I work with PhDs and master students and medical backgrounds. I work with parents who have raised children. So anybody who has gone to school and passed any diploma or got any certificate or any degree knows what responsibility is like. Anybody who's gone from being a single person to a person with partner to a parent knows what responsibility is like. And I think everywhere people have demonstrated to me that, you know, they want to be responsible human beings. So I don't think it just changes when they become employees. I think they know how to be responsible, but I think it's important to create the conditions where work feels meaningful, because you take on responsibility if it's a meaningful endeavor for you, like raising your kid is a meaningful endeavor. So you don't mind getting up in the morning at 7 a.m. and preparing their lunches before work. So I think it's really important for leaders to create conditions of meaning in work. And then constantly reinforce that vision and that purpose and the meaning, and find, and once you do that, I would say the bees will find their honey. And so I think your job is to attract those people that are attracted to that meaning as much as possible. And then you don't need to motivate them to be responsible. I think they show up pretty responsibly.
Sometimes people have different view on pharma, and when you would go and say the patient is in the center, I know you mean it. But many people think, yeah, right. So maybe this pharma, how we see it, do you think that we don't know enough to judge things in the right way?
You know, the pharmaceutical industry does not have a good rep. I'm not going to say it does. I think the rankings, if you rank it to like where it is on the line with like tobacco and some other companies, I think they're kind of all in the same camp, which is shocking to me because as a scientist by background, working in the industry for the last 16 years, almost 20 actually, if I consider my research time, it's a completely different experience that I've had. I think, you know, we really, as an industry, are the number two most regulated industry in the world after aviation. So when you get on a plane and people say your safety is your number one priority, do you believe that? You do, right? And we are as regulated as the aviation industry. So when we say patient safety and patient outcomes are our number one priority, we mean that. And if we don't deliver on that promise, our license to operate is taken away. And so that's probably the best analogy I can give you for how seriously patients at the center is taken in the industry. And Roche has a very, very long track record, over 100 years of delivering on that promise. It's a family, you know, over 50% is family owned. And so there's also a big value component that comes into it. But I think you just have to be around the industry to know of it and know how big contributor we are, not only to patients, but also to the economy.
Is this now the moment to be in this industry, because now the leapfrog steps are going on, everything is booming. So really changes. They're there every day. How does it feel really to be in this industry at this specific moment?
Well, I think this industry has been developing for many years. I mean, think about 1918's Spanish flu. You know, what kind of a different outcome that was than the most recent pandemic we lived through. And that's a result of years of investment in innovation and in science. There were two watershed moments. The first one when I joined the industry was in 2003, and the human genome sequence was complete. Do you remember that?
It seems like yesterday, but...
Well, it seems like
right?
yesterday. That's 20 years ago, and we had the code to the human genome. I think that was a real big moment where where biologists can make medicine, where we can make a cure for cancer. So I think that was first watershed moment. So that's where my excitement started. And now you're right. The technology that we have in terms of artificial intelligence, as well as data, the amount of data we have is the second watershed moment. I think it's going to take us to a whole different era. We must be careful because this needs to be done with care, with regulatory concern, with safety. But if there's any industry that knows how to regulate, the human genome sequencing, it's definitely one that I think is up for it. But it certainly is exciting as a scientist first, and obviously as a business leader second.
As a scientist being now in business, what's the difference? How does it feel differently in a way being in a lab and then being here and helping people to be in the labs?
Yeah, organizations are kind of labs for me now. I think what's not different is the curiosity and the applying problem-solving skills. So, in science, you make a hypothesis, you are very curious about a problem, you diagnose the problem really well, and then you run your experiments. I think as a business leader, now we're talking a lot about experimentation, and we talk a lot about bold moves, and we talk a lot about learning through failure.
But is it allowed to fail in business?
Well, I think there are different types of failures. I think there are responsible failures, failures to prove or disprove your hypothesis, and then there's irresponsible failures where you're just negligent or non-compliant. So I think yes, I think if you're learning and advancing the company forward, you cannot do that without failing. But I do think that word is kind of misused and overused sometimes, and most of all what it requires is a safe environment. Psychological safety. I think people will not take risks if they don't feel safe in the environment they're in, and they can only tell whether it's really safe is once they make a mistake and how you react to it.
You said you got excited back in 2003, yeah. But do you think is your role to get that excitement to the people coming now, to the students, to kids? Who is the one who should kind of inspire them?
So I think they come excited. I think my role is not to damp their enthusiasm. They come very excited, they come ready to contribute, and I think my role is to make sure that they get a good experience. I was lucky to start with really good mentors who pushed me, who challenged me. I remember still my first boss, Sammy Sue, in Roche, Canada, he gave me a project that I wanted to do. I was so enthusiastic about it, 20 years ago almost. And I said, Sammy, what's my budget? And he said, well, why don't you come with your 3 best ideas and then we'll work that out. He never constrained my enthusiasm, and he never constrained my ideation session. And I'll never forget that, because if he had given me a budget at the time, I would have probably just thought inside that box. But actually I came to him with the biggest idea, a medium idea, and a small idea. And we went with something that would have been more than if he kind of constrained me. So I think my role, yes, I'll inspire if I can. One of the best ways to inspire people is to role model. Mm-hmm. Be the example you hope to see from them. So I hope I role model enthusiasm, and I hope I don't ever extinguish the enthusiasm from others, because it's a language of action, it's a language of ingenuity, and it's I think it's what people really need to continue doing all of this hard work.
We are happy that you're part of AmCham board, and I know that you like I'm a Teacher initiative. Do you think teachers are the ones that need to be empowered to inspire kids when they teach them?
Teaching is such a selfless profession. I think it's one of those things where it's almost like a vocation. You know, you're born someone who wants to, bring up the next generation, and oftentimes in many countries I think it's undervalued and underappreciated. So first of all, kudos to you and AmCham for taking, it's a business kind of organization, and you've paid so much attention to teaching. So just really wanted to underscore that. And what can I say? Is it their role? I mean, yes, if you feel like your vocation is to be a teacher, you absolutely, are in the best profession. You are raising the next generation. And I love somebody, I think it was the incoming board member, she said, and I completely agree, teachers are people leaders. They're especially elementary and high school, they are people leaders. They have a classroom of little people or medium people or big people in front of them. But oftentimes you will recall two things that your parents taught you, and you'll recall a teacher that made a difference. And so I'm a big fan of that initiative, and
thank you so much.
That's all I guess I can say about that.
Tell me, the decision that you will transfer from science to business, what was the why? What was the moment that you said, I'll leave the lab and go to the bigger lab, which is called organization, but why decided like this?
It wasn't really a conscious decision. I was very curious about working on the latest and greatest technology, and I found a place with Roche that was working on the latest and the greatest technology. And so I was just curious by the problems that they were solving, and I felt that the private sector just had a lot more investment at the time where I could be experimenting with these things. So, but then I started to really get curious about people and leadership and how to make a bigger impact through that. And it was very organic, to be honest. I started as a medical manager and then kind of moved through the ranks all the way to where I am today. But it was quite organic. But what is the red thread, I think, is curiosity.
Davos also spotted that curiosity, and you're one of the young leaders, future leaders. What these kind of recognitions mean to you?
Well, that was, it just means that I get to learn more. So in addition to being very curious and loving science, I love to learn. And so what it means to me is I get to be part of a community of 80 or 90 other leaders across the entire world who are doing amazing things, and maybe we can help each other. I think communities like that enable you to help each other fulfill each other's passions, make the world a better place. And so it's just the beginning of that journey. I don't know what it means to me yet, but for now I'm just very excited to learn from my peers.
Perfect. Maybe the way how scientists look at the business, because you said it's important that you go also to the private institutions because there the things happen and there you have patients. But many times, especially in Slovenia, people say either you're in science or you're in business. You don't mix. We are happy to see some of the institutes that do that, but still, what would you say to the scientists, how to open up, and of course, what would you say to the business people, how to approach in order not to have these divides which do not mean very good for either of both worlds?
Yeah, I think being a hardcore scientist and being one of those for a very long time in your career is a special skill set, and if you have that talent and that skill, it's so important. I think where it becomes really interesting is if you're curious about the other side, spend some time there. So if you're a business person and you're really curious about science, spend some time at a biotech company or spend some time at a diagnostics company. And vice versa. If you're a scientist, maybe do an executive in residence or something like that. One of the best things that I did was there was a program at the University of Toronto. It was called the Masters of Biotechnology program. It was an MBA for science students. And that's kind of where I learned how to do the cross section, and I learned more about business. So I think those type of programs, those MBAs for science students, are really helpful early on. I don't see a lot of countries doing them. There's another one in London. It's the Global School for Global Business School for Health. That's another one that is trying to do that. But I think that's a safe way to
go to the other world.
To go to the other world, exactly. And the great thing about those programs is they mix people, so you start to really get to know what you really love.
And the decision that you want to go to biotechnology or biology first, what was the first for you? How this came up? Who was the one who kind of inspired you for that?
Well, it was Herbert and Boyer, because they were scientists that discovered recombinant technology. And so it was the first time we could use the human genome and produce really amazing medicines. And that was the advent of biotechnology. So if you can imagine, now we're getting very into science. This is going off.
But you're a good storyteller, so you will tell us.
I will tell you the story briefly. Before I started studying, chemists could only make medicines. With the advent of recombinant technology and the human genome being complete, biologists could make medicines. So biotechnology was born-ish in the kind of medicine sense. And now, with AI and all of the technology we have for R&D, I think computer scientists within the 5 to 7 year time frame will be playing a big portion of drug development. So I think I caught a trend 20 years ago that I got very excited about. So again, I guess my advice would be, watch the trends, feel which ones excite you, and don't question too much, what am I going to do, what is this going to lead to, but follow that. Follow the curiosity and the trend, and then you'll be surprised where you are in 20 years.
In leadership, who is the one that, I can imagine you don't have one role model, but who are the people who showed you what's the right way to be the leader? Who are the ones that really you can look up to?
You know, a couple of years ago, I probably could list like a few. But now the more and more I introspect, the more I think about my own values, it just goes back to my parents. Mm-hmm. It goes back to their values of integrity, of honesty, of hard work, of commitment, and of always doing something that you are passionate about, being a good person, and being generous. I think those are the values, especially of both my mom and my dad, but especially my dad, because we're very, very close. I also got inspired by teachers. This is why I have a soft spot for teachers, because where my parents, were out of their depth, there was always a teacher that provided me with guidance in many different times. You know, if I think about grade 3, if I think about university, you know, I can name 4 or 5 teachers that played a really important role.
And one last question, a passion you cannot say no to.
Mentoring.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you for bringing all these great things to the country that has love in the name. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Aisha. Thanks.